Joining us now from Canberra, Tim Watts, Labor MP, Sarah Henderson, Liberal MP. Thanks so much for coming on the program.
Pleasure to join you guys.
Good afternoon.
Sarah Henderson, can I just start with you? Why is it consistent to potentially subsidise Adani to the tune of $1 billion, but not subsidise the car industry?
Well, I've spoken up before about my concerns about subsidising Adani. That's my own personal view, of course.
So it's not
and
consistent.
I think with the car industry... Well, let me just finish my
but
answer,
the government's
Peter.
not consistent.
Let me just finish my answer. In relation to the car industry, of course, the car manufacturers like Ford decided to end car manufacturing under the previous Labor government. We recognise that the car manufacturers made that decision because it was no longer economically viable, but we are working very hard as a government to drive a new wave of investment in advanced manufacturing. I did, Peter, I was quite amused by your chit-chat before we came on, and I have to say that as a government, we've seen the best jobs figures in years, 371,000 new jobs in the last 12 months compared to Labor's dismal performance in its last year of government. So on so many measures, I think we are doing extremely well and focusing on the big issues like productivity reform and, of course, like business tax cuts, which are essential to driving jobs and investment.
Well, let me ask Tim. Sarah makes a good point there about the jobs figures, and the Treasurer was keen to crow about them this morning. Why is Labor standing in the way? Doesn't the government have a mandate to implement its jobs and growth business tax cut?
Well, like you, Christine, I heard that the jobs and growth slogan plenty at the last election, but I can tell you that Labor took an alternative to the Australian people, and I ran for election on a different platform, a platform of inclusive prosperity, a platform that doesn't believe that an unfunded $65 billion tax cut to multinational corporations will somehow magically trickle down to Australians.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't seen that translate into wages growth. It hasn't been implemented yet, across the board, so you can't claim that that's a result of any jobs figures at the moment.
Oh, Peter, seriously, I mean, Bill Shorten, up until a couple of years ago, supported business tax cuts. He spoke about how important they were for competitive advantage. We need to be a global competitor, and business tax cuts are essential. And it's absolute hypocrisy for Labor to be now parroting this line when Bill Shorten and Labor previously supported business tax cuts to drive jobs. And this is one of the problems we have at the moment with this Parliament, an opposition leader that has no interest in reform and has no interest in the national interest, quite frankly.
Well, Tim Watts, can I just ask? I mean, it's a really straight-up question. Labor opposed the small business company tax cuts up to companies or businesses with a turnover of 50 million. You supported it with a turnover of up to 2 million. Will you wind it back when you get into government, or will you find a way to absorb it because it's too hard to wind back?
Well, we've been really clear, Peter. We've said that our position has consistently been that we didn't think there should be a across-the-board corporate tax cut like the one that the government has introduced. We did say, as you've identified, that we'd supported up to $2 million, but we opposed extending that corporate tax cut to companies up to $50 million.
So you'll wind it back?
Now, Chris Bowen's been very clear that we've got to take a new position into the next election, and we will look at
you won't wind it back?
The fiscal position, the budgetary position, and we'll make our position on the current corporate tax rate that has been implemented.
So that means
we will make a decision in the lead up to the next election.
So when you say Chris Bowen has been clear, you mean we just don't know, we'll find out?
He's been very clear that we will be responsible and we will develop our policy on this corporate tax cut informed by the budgetary position that we encounter when we go into the next federal election.
So what that means is $150 billion of higher taxes that Labor will take to the election based on their current position.
Okay, so but just to be clear though,
economically reckless.
Sorry, I just got to jump in there. So just to be clear though, Tim Watts, the clarity that has been provided is that we don't yet have clarity, but we will at some point in the future have clarity.
Now, we've been very clear about the process that we will take. I should say, Peter, that we have been more upfront than any opposition in recent memory about our tax arrangements. You talked earlier about the difficulty in implementing reform, and I think one of the great difficulties we've seen in recent times is oppositions who have been very good at tearing down governments but not very good at offering alternatives while in opposition. And at last federal election, at the last federal election,
case in point, you're destroying...
Sarah, if you can just shut up for 2 seconds, I will articulate.
Sorry.
If you want to cut across me...
Tim, please don't tell me to shut up. That's
Sarah,
really offensive.
If you want to talk across me this whole interview,
that's fine, but don't tell me to shut up. That's really offensive.
But you need to pull your neck in and let me speak here.
And
what I'm saying is that at the last federal election, we took a very extensive tax policy to the election on capital gains reform, negative gearing reform. We've been very clear about tax trust treatment reform. We've taken the most substantive tax agenda to the people, and that's how you deliver reform. You're upfront with them about what you're going to do, and then you take that to an election and you get a mandate for it. We'll do the same thing about the treatment of company tax rates.
A moment of silence. I was just enjoying it there. Thank you. Let me move on. Sorry, PV.
No. I'm looking forward to your question.
Oh, thank you. Let me move on. The report on the front page of The Australian today. Tim, Labor's policy of a 50% renewable energy target by 2030 is going to add almost $200 to the average householder bill. I mean, really, what an irresponsible policy for you to take to the election.
Oh, Christina, I mean, it seems like we are getting into a world of recycled beat-ups on energy policy. I do recall seeing this fabrication ran in February of this year in the Courier Mail by another News Limited publication, and it was wrong then and it's wrong today. This modelling seems to model something that maybe it's Malcolm Turnbull's policy, I don't know, but it's certainly not Labor's policy. The modelling on the front page of The Australian today was an emissions intensity scheme that would introduce a $69 carbon price that would apply from 2020. Now, that's not our policy. We've not said that we would have a $69 carbon price linked to an international market. Maybe that will be Malcolm Turnbull's fourth policy in the next 12 months. We'll see. He's already gone through an emissions intensity scheme, a clean energy target, and the detail-free thought bubble that he released last week. But look, this is just another beat-up, another fabrication. It's nothing but nonsense. Labor is for renewable energy, we are for stability of supply, and we're for lower power bills. And we'll deliver that through a system that delivers certainty for investors.
I want to go to Sarah in a moment, but Tim, if I could just do a follow-up to that. I'm trying to understand which is the attack that is the accurate attack from Labor, because you had a very powerful attack that was internally difficult for Malcolm Turnbull by pointing out to him that what was announced last week on energy policy, this was through question time with repeated questions, was akin to a price on carbon. And the Prime Minister looked a little uncomfortable answering that at times. But you also enjoyed mocking him that he was, if you like, kowtowing to Tony Abbott and his refusal to go down a more realistic climate change style policy with his energy policy. It can't be both. I mean, it clearly can only be one or the other. Which one is the accurate attack and which one was the political fluff and bubble?
Well, I think the reality, Peter, is that they're both right. Now, it's difficult because we only have a handful of pages of detail, but the way this works is the modelling released, or the analysis released by the government on their latest thought bubble, shows that renewable energy as a component of energy generation in Australia will be lower in 2030 than it would be if the government sat back and did absolutely nothing. So it looks like the mechanism that the government has introduced does impose some kind of a carbon price, but it is set at such a low level that renewable energy will go backwards compared to what we have today. And it's an extraordinary achievement in policy making from the Turnbull government, but we are used to seeing extraordinary things from this government.
Now we're going to go from the highbrow and serious to the ridiculous, or...
Well, sorry, Christina, just before we do, can I just briefly comment? Labor is completely at sea on our national energy guarantee, which is all about driving down emissions and also driving down power prices. What we will see from Labor is $200 a year extra on every household's bill if it pursues its 50% renewable energy target.
Sarah
it's
Henderson,
reckless.
If you're going to jump in on my show, I'm going to jump in on your point, because you have a
Sure,
12-page
go for it.
glossy. You have a 12-page glossy brochure, an 8-page letter from the Energy Security Board, and a page-and-a-half media release. You have no modelling has been confirmed in Senate estimates. How can anyone know what the National Energy Guarantee is actually going to save households? Sam Maiden here at Sky News has been told by John Pierce it could be as little as $25 in the first few years. How can we know what your plan is going to do?
Well, that's not the position of John Pierce and the National Energy Board.
He told Sam
a
Maiden.
very eminent group of experts. So, of course, what we are seeing from our policy is a determination to support renewables, to drive down emissions and also drive down power prices. Now, there is more work to be done, absolutely, and the Energy Minister has been very clear on that. But in contrast to Labor, we are seeing an absolute chaos of mix of policies from the Labor Party. The 50% RET, which of course will desert
You've
coal-fired
both had
power.
an extraordinary amount of time to make your points, which
will
I have to
desert
say we're going to hear
coal-fired power
rehashed in
stations
question time as well. I want to
and
try to end
compromise
this.
energy reliability.
Oh, good on you. I want to try to end this on a point of unity. Well, no, we're not going to go Chobo. I think we're going to be out of time today on that. Let me raise a point. Maybe we can all take a bit of pride in Ben Simmons, Australian basketball player. In fact, I believe from Victoria originally.
He's the #1 draft pick.
He is just, yes, and he was in the top draft picks. He has just had a triple-double in the NBA. Tim, can you help us celebrate that?
Christina, an extraordinary day today. Ben Simmons became the youngest player to score a triple-double in the NBA since LeBron James. Just his 4th game in the NBA.
Okay, we got
the first
wrap
Australian
this up
rookie
quick,
to score
Tim.
a triple-double in this season. And we knew it was going to happen because at APH Basketball, Parliament this
I'm
morning,
the former
I was wearing his
head
jersey.
of
It was a
Basketball
good
Australia.
omen.
Of course it is. All right.
I had a double myself
Absolute setup.
of turnovers, missed layups, and then Hugh 6
Sarah
sledges.
Henderson.
But you heard it here first.
Sarah
Ben
Henderson.
Simmons,
What
about
first
Gary Ablett?
NBA MVP.
Sarah Henderson,
What about
Victoria
Gary Ablett coming
is the
to
home
Geelong?
of
That is the
basketball.
biggest news.
You got to be proud of it.
No,
All right,
Look,
we're going to
look,
wrap
we are
this
very
up. I
proud,
thought
but
we'd
the
find
big-
consensus being proud of an Australian doing well overseas. We can't.
Oh,
well,
there
look, that
was
is fabulous news.
consensus.
All
But
right.
not as good as
Consensus.
Gary Ablett coming to Geelong, Christina.
We're all very proud of
Ben
whoever that
Simmons.
basketballer was.
Okay,
All right.
thank you both.